Good evening, everyone, and thank you for joining us on tonight. Um, my name is Tiara, and I'm the Live Free Texas organizer here with Faith in Texas. And we just thank you for joining us for a much needed conversation and discussion that we'll be having on tonight. Before we get started, I will like to just let people know who Faith in Texas is. Faith in Texas is a nonpartisan, multi-race, multi-faith grassroots organization focused on working together to achieve economic, racial, and social justice for all people. We believe in centering our faith around those who are most vulnerable and those who are most directly impacted. This priority of our Live Free campaign aims to end mass incarceration here in Texas by organizing directly impacted people, their allies, and our clergy members. Um, for those who don't know, I am directly impacted and I am now a leader with Live Free. And tonight's conversation will be focused on COVID-19 in the jails. And we'll be speaking to why it is that our people be released in this moment and in this hour. So we're going to go ahead and move on into our agenda. I'll start with letting you guys know a little bit more transparency about what the experience is like in the Luceric County Jail from my personal story. Um, for me, um, Luceric isn't an easy place to be in. Some people think county jail, and it's I don't know how people view county jail, and I don't know what I thought the county jail was going to be like. But in my experience, there were many uh, points of public risk and health risk as it pertains to COVID-19 being in the jails. Starting with the arrest. When I was arrested, I was immediately taken into booking. And booking is like this place where you go into this room with however many people come in. I don't actually know the capacity, but there's chairs lined up and you sit down. And when they call your name, you get fingerprinted, you take a picture, and then you wait some more. At that point in time, you're being identified and you're getting processed to go into a magistration arraignment hearing. In that magistrate hearing, you'll be given a bond or you'll be given no bond. You'll be given the charges that you've allegedly committed. Those will be announced in a room full of people. So in that time, you're around a lot of people, and for me, the reason why we felt the need to have a town hall is because we don't know what the current processes and any of these steps are looking like now with the spread of COVID-19. So when you're going through the magistrate process, you're sitting right next to different people, and you're pleading, or you cannot plead, whatever you decide during that process. From there, you go back into a larger room filled with people. And this is like what I think is like your last chance to, like, if you have loved ones that you want to reach out to, and you possibly have, if you possibly have a bond, this will be the time where you're like reaching out to your loved ones to let them know, for one, that you're in jail. For two, this is my bond amount, and can you help me? So this is like your last chance before you get moved into a cell or a tank. During that time, I've seen some of the most craziest and horrific things happen during that process specifically, because as a woman, I mean, we need toiletries, we need a lot of different things, and I've seen people ask for those things, but during that process, you're not in the system yet, and sometimes if they're nice, you get the things that you need, but sometimes you won't. So I've seen like people saying they need these things, and if they're loud and they get crazy about it, they will remove them into a solitary cell until the process proceeds. So for me, I am concerned. Um, I know that that's just on a normal day, right? And I just can't imagine what it looks like there now. And this is just onto the next process. So, for instance, for me, I could not afford my bill. So uh, I didn't know what to do. So I went up to the tank. But as you move into there, you're given you're given your supplies. You get a suit, which usually consists of like two suits. You get one to wear, and you get one to have. You get about two pairs of undergarments. You get a mat, and these mats, you don't know who laid on them before you. You get a mat, you get some toiletries, and you get a few things when you first come in. A few bars, a couple bars of soap. They're really small, um, and yeah, that's what you're given: toothbrush and toothpaste. Um, During that time, you're also given a search. You're getting searched for probably the last time before you get moved into your cell. So you're checking your hair, you're checking your clothes, you're getting touched by, another one of the county one of the county officials are making sure you don't have anything on you. And from there, you're in a room with, like, once again, a room filled with people, with other women from myself, and you're moving on to the next phase. From that point in time, people that you've met during the booking, people that you've met during the magistrate, you guys will be separated. You won't move to the same tank. You guys do not know each other. You're going to be separated. And from that point on, I remember at the time we were doing TB testing. So we got a TB testing done in the hallway, and I was shipped off to my tank, which is in the North Tower. By the time I got into the North Tower, it it wasn't the cleanest place that it's jail, right? But it was crazy how, to me, the conditions were. um like I said, the soap, you have to wash your undergarments with the soap. You don't get to switch those out every other week or every other day. Your suits, you get to do that, but not with your undergarments. So the same soap that you're washing with is the same soap that you're going to hand wash your undergarments with. So I found that to be just kind of strange. And with COVID-19 in the midst of that, it really has me even more concerned. Um, I found out what the sick call was, and the sick call is a form that you fill out, and you fill out this form, and it goes to the infirmary, and the infirmary has about 24 to 48 hours to respond. It's either 24 to 48 or 72 to respond and get you to the infirmary as soon as possible. However, if you are a violent offender, that process could be a little bit more tedious because you need more guards to take you, to transport you, versus if you're in general population. And I know that because at one time I've been to Lucerne, unfortunately, multiple times, and there's times where I've been in general pop. And general pop is even more scary when I think about it at these point in times, because in your tank, there's about 3 bunks, so about 8 people, 8 women into a cell, and the cleaning processes are not mandated or mandatory in the North Tower. I know for sure. The supplies are dropped off. You pick up the supplies, and at the discretion of whoever is inside, you can clean. And it's typically a turnaround time for them to pick back up the supplies. And it'll typically be some sanitary spray, a trash bag, and I think that's about it. And something to wipe with, and gloves as well. You'll be given those supplies, and at your own leisure, you clean or you don't clean. Um, there were times and instances where I remember people detoxing or just sick. I don't know what was wrong at some of the times. And it took a little longer than 24 to 48 hours or even 72 for those people to be transported. And we kind of just had to deal with it, like we would just have to deal with it a lot of the times. And I remember times when I was in general pop, it kind of moved a little quicker because the infirmary isn't too far. But in general population, you have about 50 people in one room. It's not like in the movies or on the TVs when you see a few people or this in a cell. You're in like a widespread room. And these people, just to wrap up what I'm speaking to in my experience of being in the county jail, is that these people cannot social distance right now. These people cannot protect themselves right now. And we're concerned as a people. So I hope that tonight, our purpose in tonight is that you leave with a little bit more understanding as to what's happening and what you can do in this moment to make sure and ensure that it is happening, that something is happening. We don't want to assume anything, and we want to hold our elected officials accountable in this hour. We have loved ones that we love that are inside those jails. I myself has been inside those jails, and I can only imagine if this was 5 years before or a few years in advance, what would that look like for me? So I'm going to get ready to hand it over to Dr. Michael Green. But before so, let me just introduce you to everyone that's on our panel on tonight, now part of our town hall conversation. We have the Honorable Judge Brandon Birmingham of the 29th and 2nd Court, Felony Court Districts. We also have Benjamin Robinson, my colleague, Live Free Texas organizer. We have Leticia Royal, Live Free Street Certified Leader, who will be on the call. We also have Dr. Michael Green, an incredible faith leader here in Southern Dallas. And we have Jessica Jones. Jessica Jones, very healthcare expert, and she'll be speaking to us in a moment about COVID-19 and how it is impacting our people in this hour and what we can do. So Dr. Green, you can join us now.
Can you hear me? You can? Okay, good. So I'm not going to be long. I'm really excited about the engagement that will take place amongst those who are here today and to share some ideas. So I'm just going to say a few things about incarceration and COVID-19 and how one might frame it theologically from a faith community perspective. And so for me, I think there's a number of ways of doing it. But for me, I start out with this very important conviction, this very important notion that all human beings are created in the image of God. And that has tremendous implications for how we should treat one another and how society should organize its social practices. And more particularly, I would argue that this notion of all of us being created in the image of God, imago Dei, means that we need to organize our social practices, including our practices in local and county jails and prisons, organizing those practices in such a way that they respect the inherent dignity and worth of every human being. And that this dignity and worth of human beings is not something that the state bestows upon us. It's not something that local officials can give us. It's something that we already possess, part and parcel of being created in the image of God. So with regard to incarceration and COVID-19, it would seem to me that what's really important, or one of the things that's really important, is that there's certain practices that are in violation of this notion that we all have inherent dignity and that we should be treated accordingly. In light of COVID-19, the fact that people are crammed together, that social distancing is not a practice that can really be implemented. The fact that somebody may be sitting in jail simply because they cannot pay the bail or bond out is to me is a violation of this notion that every single person, including prisoners, are vested with worth, inherent worth. And so I believe that the faith community is called to advocate on behalf of those who find themselves in this situation right now, and that it is, in my mind, a divine mandate that we do all that we can to rectify the situation, get people out um, and get people safe, and that the current practices that that we see right now, particularly people being crammed in unsanitary conditions, people who are there simply because largely because they don't have the money to get out, is something that I think all of us, and particularly the faith community, needs to decry and needs to raise up their voice in this. I often think, what would I do if I was in that situation right now? And if I was in jail right now, even if I had not committed what I'm being accused of committing, I really feel I would be inclined to take a plea and say, yeah, I did it, because of my fear of remaining in that situation and being possibly exposed to COVID-19. So there's a whole lot of issues involved here. I think there's some theological issues. There's other issues, I think, that regard constitutionality, that I'm not a lawyer and not, prepared to speak on. But I think that the faith community needs to rally around and raise their voice, and to do what we can do to be plugged in to all these efforts that are being geared around this whole issue of incarceration and COVID-19. So that's my comments.
And now we'll hear from Jessica Jones.
Thank you, Tiara. Tonight, I just kind of wanted to have a discussion amongst us just about what public health really is, and how do we apply that concept to mass incarceration. I know that when we've heard a lot of chatter about the term public health, it's in a very academic manner, and not something that the regular, common, everyday person can relate to. So public health is just simply the health and safety of a general population or community. For us, the population could be the group of people on this call. It can be your neighborhood. It could be your colleagues. It could be the school that you attend, any group of people. And in this manner, when we start talking about public health, one of the biggest factors and notions that public health rides on is the fact that there are social determinants that determine our health of just everyday people, but also in the way that we live our lives. And another theory that's come from that is the zip code theory. And that is when we often talk about the zip code that a person resides in or the zip code they are born in often determines their life expectancy. In a deeper format, when discussing that, we think about, okay, so what are the things in a zip code that may determine how well a person lives their life? That means access to clean water. That means access to safe housing. That means access to fresh foods and vegetables, public transportation for you to be able to get to your home, to your job, even in an economic status of, are there jobs in your community that you can work in? Do you have to travel 2 hours to the next city to be able to find work? Do you have the ability to obtain a good education in your community, or are your children having to be bused 2 and 3 districts over? So when we think about those things, and I'll zone in on food insecurity. Food insecurity is a popular social determinant that everybody likes to touch on. And food insecurity is a major problem here in southern sector of Dallas. And when I think about food insecurity, and I think about the people who are on the outside who every day don't have access to fresh fruits and vegetables to build their immune system, I then think about the people who are incarcerated. And I start taking those social determinants and applying those to people inside. And first thing we think about is people can't social distance in jail. Well, people aren't getting fresh fruits and vegetables to build their immune system either. People are not in places where they're getting a full 8 hours worth of sleep. People are not in places where they're getting basic medical and health care. People are not in places where they're getting mental health care. And so the problem with COVID-19 and mass incarceration isn't just about social distancing, but it's about people not getting the basic needs for them to have a basic level of health care in the first place. So I know, Tierra, you talked about earlier about the ability for people to be able to sanitize their cells and wipe things down, much like we've been trying to do in the outside. Lysol and Clorox wipes are nowhere to be found. But I think about when we're in jail, who's advocating to make sure that people have those same supplies in their cell? How are you keeping a cell clean when there are 10 people in a 6 foot by 6 foot room? And so when you start talking about a population who doesn't have their basic health needs, that's when things become a public health crisis. And when we start talking about a release of those individuals and people are not being tested, they're not getting the proper medication, when you release them, are they going to get resources on the outside? How do they know whether or not they've been infected with COVID-19? I had a colleague share a story with me a couple of weeks ago about a mentee who was released from jail on the basis of an ankle monitor for whatever the reason was. I wasn't sure. He had been tested for COVID-19, but didn't know the results. When he got home, not knowing that he was testing positive, infected every person that lived in that house, including the person who was responsible for the main bulk of income for everyone in there to survive. This person becomes sick and now can't go to work, and they lose income. But what I think is, how could that have been prevented when he was in jail? Why was he not tested sooner or even tested at all? And when he was tested, and if it had come back positive, would he have been given the proper health care to be able to make it through? So as we continue to have these discussions and we draw a framework, a plan, I think we also have to create a story and a narrative where, like Dr. Green said, we have to touch on the dignity of incarcerated people. Because incarcerated people are a population that a good portion of this country does not believe deserves the basic needs, doesn't believe that they deserve help. And it's time to paint the story and humanize these individuals And it's time to put the face show that people are truly human, because they are humans and they deserve every bit of the rights that we have on the outside, but also be honest and be honest and be extreme. And when we say, if this is not taken care of, if we're not releasing people, if we're not slowing down the admission of people back into jail, we're gonna have bodies on our hands. We're gonna have blood on our hands, and somebody is gonna have to be responsible for that.
Thank you, Jessica. That segues us perfect into the next portion of this town hall, which in his court to ensure that the health and safety of people in the jail, but also to ensure, like Jessica was saying, that we reduce the jail population as much as possible, because that's priority number one right now, for us at least. So thank you, Jessica. Thank you, Dr. Green. And I'm going to pass it over now to you, Leticia, to take it over with Judge Birmingham.
All righty. Hi, everyone. Can you guys hear me?
Yes.
All righty. My name is Leticia Royal, or Keisha. I'm an active leader with Live Free Street Certified. I am not formally incarcerated. However, I am directly impacted by the system. I have a brother who spent many years inside of the prison system. I also have a friend who is locked in currently inside of one of the Texas prisons. My brother actually spent approximately 9 years inside of the Texas prisons, and thank God he's no longer there. But, you know, even still, the rising coronavirus numbers in Texas jails is very alarming at this time. So this is what brings us all here today. Today we have the Honorable Brandon Birmingham. We appreciate your time and your transparency with these questions today.
Yes, ma'am. It's good to be here.
I'll go ahead and get started here. So in your perspective, how does the Dallas County Jail pose a unique risk to public health in this crisis?
Well, that is exactly what Jessica Jones was talking about, as well as Dr. Green. There is no social distancing. You know, everybody's crammed in. We've seen a decrease in the jail population from about 5,900 or so on March the 16th or 17th to right around 5,000 or 5,100. So there has been somewhat of a decrease, but you know, the lack of social distancing is the biggest problem. I know too that I saw on the news today, WFAA was reporting that Dallas County Jail is unfortunately the most infected jail in the entire state. And, you know, that's a sad thing. I mean, nobody wants to see that, but that's what we're dealing with.
All righty. Did anybody else want to chime in before I proceed? Okay. Well, can you tell us anything, Mr. Birmingham? Can you tell us anything?
Brandon. Listen, just call me Brandon. We're good.
Okay, Brandon.
Yeah.
Well, can you tell us anything about what the conditions are like inside of the jail and what actions are being taken to protect incarcerated people?
Well, I know that they've increased, at least in the holdovers at the courthouse, and the pathway that incarcerated individual will take from where they're being held up to the court. They're have told me that they're increasing the type and quality of sanitation. I know that we've decreased the number of people that we're calling up. I'm not actually calling up anybody in my, we call it the jail chain. I'm not calling anybody up to my courtroom because I'm trying to cut down on as much human contact as there is along the way. I was in court on March the 16th or 17th, and a lawyer brought me some paperwork that somebody had before that had tested positive. And so I realized then that, then that person didn't know that they had it when they originally signed the paperwork, of course, but that paperwork goes from the lawyer to the prosecutor, to the court, to the clerk, to the bailiff. I mean, that paperwork changes hands so many times. So one of the things that I wanted to do very, very early on was cut down the human contact, in person-to-person contact. I was told by the Department of Health and Human Services that indirect contact like I had, is far less dangerous and far less likely to cause a transmission than is person-to-person contact. So that Thursday night, I actually stayed up at the courthouse until about 10 o'clock and worked with Felicia Petrie is the district clerk for Dallas County, and one of her colleagues, district court manager named Tia Finney Davenport, she and I stayed up and we figured out a way for me to electronically sign paperwork that would be acceptable and recognizable and secure for her clerks, which means that I could do things remotely. So that was great because we were able to accomplish from that one night signatures. I think I've signed probably 1,200 orders since that night that I've been able to do away from the courthouse, which means we're cutting down that person-to-person contact, which is a very good thing. And it wouldn't have had I don't know how to make that happen. It takes the expertise of somebody in their field, in their part of the process to help make this happen. And Ms. Finney Davenport was wonderful when she did that, and it's led to, I think, a decrease in the potential for the spread, at least surrounded by my court. And then after that, the next step that I took in the process, Ms. Royal, was to just simply, okay, the law imposes certain requirements on everybody at each of the way. And so by the time they get to me, in order for me to make a lawful decision, one that will be upheld, I have to adhere to certain requirements. So the question became, how can I adhere to those requirements as quickly as possible without having somebody stay in jail any longer than they need to? When we say that we are really concerned that the court system is going to grind to a halt, I think what we're really talking about, what we really mean there, is that the ability for somebody to be released when they should be released is being ground to a halt. So that's where I focus my attention. I don't think I've accepted a plea bargain since that day, as a matter of fact. And so what we've been doing is we've identified those cases, and I want to give a shout out or say thank you to some of the prosecutors and the public defenders and the court-appointed attorneys and my court coordinator who I sent out, and I just said, okay, look, y'all tell me, who do you have that has a potential for being released? And we're not talking about bail review hearings. I can talk about those in just a minute, but who do you have that really is going to be impacted by this? Where I think somebody wrote in the chat, it was either Miss Wallace or maybe Phil, said something like, it's important to remember that people are going to, and I think Dr. Green mentioned it too, try to strike a deal so that they don't remain in there long. And that's an involuntary plea. I don't want that to happen. Nobody wants that to happen. So what I've done instead is say, okay, at the instant in time that the parties have identified to me somebody that can be released as a result of any proceeding, I'm going to give them a PR bond. No questions asked. And that's what we've been able to accomplish. And I think since that time, I want to say probably 300 people have been released by me because of that. So when the parties are able to agree on something that would result in their release, we have figured out a way to get them out of the jail. And we've also been able to safeguard, I think, through that process, the idea that they're not accepting a plea simply because they're incarcerated and they want to get out, which is a common problem in our system, by the way, that happened long before COVID, okay? But those are the things that we can do just immediately on sort of from a triage perspective for cases that are already winding their way through my court. We have not been able in Dallas County to come up with a truly remote plan for plea bargaining. That is going to happen, but until that happens, I'm not too worried about it because we have ways to release people short of accepting a plea. In July of last year, I started doing bond review hearings. And bond review hearings were for anybody. I was instigating those from the court. And if somebody was in custody longer than 24 hours, then I was getting the lawyer a note and a prosecutor the note saying, please tell me why this person is still incarcerated. And if the sole reason that they're still incarcerated is because they have an inability to get out of jail, then I'm going to release them on a PR bond. So it's a second layer of review. We can save for another day the first layer of review, which is true bail reform that can come from legislation, but maybe that's a topic for another day. But we've continued those bail review hearings ever since. And again, I don't do this by myself. I have a great staff who's been able to sort of round up all these cases. They check the overnight list. I'm getting onto the lawyers. I'm able to work out with the lawyers a communication system. I've done a lot of stuff on Zoom. I've done Microsoft Teams, FaceTime. I've also done a good old-fashioned phone call too, to be able to talk to both sides short of a formal hearing, which I'm not able to really give them at this time, to see what we can work out and what I can do using that process that I talked about before, where I can sign documents remotely and that be acceptable to the district clerk's office. That's what we've been doing in my court. I mean, other courts have been coming up with some of their own solutions. But that's what I've been doing, trying to identify as early as possible those that need to be released.
Thank you for that. I mean, I think that was a great perspective. I was actually having a conversation with a friend earlier today who was advising me that in Harris County, that the inmates are pretty much on like a strict lockdown. The attorneys are not being allowed into the jails due to coronavirus. The inmates are eating, you know, like the stacked lunches because they can't eat from the kitchen because of some of the workers tested positive for coronavirus. So, I mean, but it's good to hear that, you know, the plea bargains are not, you know, being accepted currently, and we're just pretty much giving everyone a chance to actually be, you know, given a fair trial.
It's important. And I think, you know, the other day-to-day business that happens in my court that has impacted, I've seen, is there are a number of people who are addressing substance abuse issues, some of whom are going to be given inpatient treatment. Well, of course, the inpatient treatment facilities, the community facilities, are not accepting people from the Dallas County Jail. And so another population, a subpopulation of people that we need to account for, that I need to account for, is those that are in my, you know, assigned to my court that are awaiting transfer to one of those facilities. And so we did review all of those cases, and I changed most, if not all of those cases, to outpatient treatment, because I don't know how long this is going to last. I mean, you know, is it going to be 30 more days before they won't accept them, or 6 months? You know, I honestly don't know. And to be frank, nobody can tell me. A lot of it depends on, you know, how well we're getting a handle of this situation, which is a fluid thing. So we did review those, and I think I'm trying to err as best I can on the side of release. And in the overwhelming majority of cases, I think that's what we've been able to accomplish.
Great. Okay. Well, can you tell us from your perspective, who are the decision makers in this moment, or who have the power to reduce the jail population?
I think, yes, ma'am. I think there's a, everybody has their role at each step in the way. And so who are the people that make the call? Well, there isn't one person who gets to do it. It's not just the judges. It's not just the district attorney. It's not just the sheriff. It's everybody working together and understanding their role and how they can be creative in this time. So for example, you know, the district attorney's office, they're not trying cases. Nobody's trying cases. So I've noticed that the DAs have spent a whole lot of time reviewing their cases to determine whether or not they've made proper plea recommendations and are those plea bargain recommendations going to change. They've also been very active in giving to me dismissal of charges before the indictment, where they know that they're not going to get a lab test. And Judge Cruzo has instructed his people, if we're not going to get a lab test and we're not going to make it to grand jury, then there's no sense at all in keeping somebody in custody before we can prove that the person is guilty of the crime that they've been accused of. So I've signed, I actually counted it before, it was over 300 of those dismissals before today. Where those cases have been dropped by the arresting agency or by the district attorney's office and put on hold. The cases are not going to go away forever, but that at least we're not going to keep them in right now while that's happening. So that's a pretty good example of how in their own role, everybody can be creative. The district clerk's office too, I just can't tell you enough. Ms. Finney Davenport's a great shining example of somebody who was willing to go the extra step and understand how her role could be used to help alleviate some of the problem. And she was magnificent in doing that. So it really is a team effort, and it doesn't stop with the people that directly make these decisions, like the DAs and the judges. It also has a lot to do with, what is the funding that the Dallas County Commissioners Court is willing to put into this. And from my experience so far, at least as it relates to setting up the infrastructure for doing truly remote pleas. And by truly remote, I mean just like this, except we have a defendant, we have a prosecutor, we have a court reporter, we have a judge, we have somebody, if they're in custody, we're able to get into the jail and, have everybody have this dialogue. And the law imposes certain requirements on that, but that ain't free. And we have to change the hardware, which has been some of the holdup. But the Commissioner's Court, as far as I know, has basically given us everything that we've asked for in trying to come up with paying for some of the solutions to make these solutions happen. So it takes them, they got to pay for it. And they also have to increase the pretrial department. I'm telling you, an understaffed, underfunded pretrial department is one of the enemies of true bail reform. It's one of the enemies of the movement to try to make sure that nobody is in custody simply because they can't afford to get out. A true pretrial department, especially during a time like this, is necessary. And so I'm hopeful that the Commissioner's Court will continue to recognize that and give us more people and fully staff that department. So it takes a lot. It takes a full team of folks who are willing and able to do the work.
Understood. It's collective for sure. So how has Governor Abbott's executive order affected your work in this crisis?
Not at all. I ignored it when it came out. I think that you're going to find out as this case makes its way to the Supreme Court of Texas that perhaps he overstepped his bounds. And I think obviously it was a thinly veiled attempt to rebut what was happening in Harris County when some of the judges said for these classes of cases, they automatically get PR bonds. So, he jumped in on that and gave us his opinion. I mean, I think in effect and impact me in particular, because I'm already doing these bail review hearings. I'm already communicating with the district attorney's office and the public defender's office as early on as possible. I would like to say that, a really great way for this all to happen would be to have a public defender or a court-appointed lawyer and a prosecutor at arraignment as early, giving the judge who's doing these things, the magistrates making these decisions, an opportunity to be heard, both sides, to give the judge as much information as they can. That's not the rule right now. That's not the law right now, but I would like to see it changed. But Governor Abbott's order is in response to what they did in Harris County. And I mean, I don't want to predict what the Supreme Court of Texas is going to do, but I don't think that order is long in the tooth.
Got it. Okay. So what innovative ideas has the country tried to get people out of jail? Or I'm sorry, not country, county. Has the county tried?
I'm sorry,
what has worked or what has failed at this present time?
What's worked is the sort of creative solutions to making sure that when I say it's shut down before, I gave you all what my definition was, that means that nobody gets out. Well, that can't happen. So we've been creative with plea bargaining. With PR bonds. We've been creative with, communicating earlier on so that the judge can make sure that nobody stays in simply because we can't have a trial. We've been working pretty hard at that. The biggest problem that we've had is a technological one to actually get into the jail and bring everybody together. Law requires a couple things in order for me to lawfully accept a plea bargain. As I said before, I'm not that concerned about it right now because we've been doing the PR bonds, but for the plea bargains, eventually we need this to happen because it's going to move this whole process a lot quicker, I promise you. So what has to happen is that for a video conference plea like this, the law requires that everybody involved, the defendant, the prosecutor, the lawyer, it's on the record, it's on video, they can all see me, okay, and they can talk. Now the lawyer and the defendant have to be able to separately converse. If they want to, they have to be able to separately converse. I don't know if, I always get my things confused now. We're on Zoom, right? I think one of these has a deal where you can go into like a private room, okay? That would be acceptable. The other thing is that we have to broadcast this. I noticed that I think we're broadcasting this on Facebook. That's great. It has to have a similar way to broadcast this to keep the open courts provision satisfied in our Constitution. The people have to be able to know and deserve to know what's happening in their courts. And so we've got to be able to do that. We've gotten everything together except for getting into the jail. So the county is updating the hardware. We've also are starting with a process where we are going to bring only the felony defendants over. We're going to make sure that we don't bring 20 people at a time. We're going to keep it as good as we can, as low numbers as we can, where the result of, and we're going to cull the people. So we're not just going to bring everybody over to talk to their lawyer. They can have other ways to communicate. I'm talking about only a plea bargain, and I'm only talking about plea bargains, the result of which will result in, at least for right now, the release of somebody. Eventually, we'll be able to do all the plea bargains that way. As a matter of fact, eventually, we'll be able to do all kinds of hearings that way. And I think that'll be wonderful. I noticed that some of the times, it's hard for people to come down and be heard on behalf of their loved one who is either the victim of a crime or who is charged with the crime. Well, this is an easy way to accept witness testimony. Short of a jury trial, I don't see why we can't do this for basically every type of hearing there is. And I do think if there's one silver lining in this cloud, it's that we are going to bring technology to this process when we so desperately need it and to make it more efficient.
Awesome. Well, I like that you just took your own initiative, to continue working as you feel you should, what's in the best interest of the inmates at this time. But I can only imagine what the workload looks like for you at this time. So are you overworked currently, or is it heavy on you right now?
It's been a lot more stressful than it was before. That's for sure, because the emails never stop coming. But I mean, we're in different times, and I think everybody's got to be on their toes at all times. I mean, it doesn't matter. Like, there's no weekends anymore, because, it doesn't. I'll get to it on Monday morning at 8:30. No, that's not acceptable when somebody's going to be in custody Saturday and Sunday. That's not fair. It's not right.
So how are you prioritizing those cases currently?
The way that I'm prioritizing them is to make sure that we are dealing with those where the result of the disposition is going to be the release of somebody, whether it's on probation, whether we can do something creative on probation for somebody who's violated their probation allegedly. Maybe we can, do alternatives to incarceration, which I think is a great thing because, before COVID ever happened, there was a movement to do that. And so now we have a better and even a greater incentive to do that. And so I think that's a good thing. There is a good thing. So we're looking at trying to make sure that the cases we're focusing on are those where we really can result in the release. One of the biggest problems, and I don't profess to know how to make this happen other than to review the bonds, is our jury trials. I mean, where we are at an impasse, where, you know, we are set for a jury trial. We've had to reschedule a number of jury trials. I do want y'all to know, though, that, you know, not every jury trial is simply about whether the person did it or not. Sometimes it comes down to punishment, but, you know, we don't have a way right now to get 70 people in to put together a jury and then have 12 people to listen to the trial. We're just not there yet. So short of reviewing those cases for bonds, that's a problem. That's a problem that we got to figure out a way to get over. And I don't know how to do it just yet.
For sure, for sure. So we're definitely wrapping it up here, but I definitely want to ask, how has the current crisis changed the way you view or think about criminalization and punishment as the primary response to society?
I think that it's going to be a good impetus for change. Some of the change that that I think that we have needed to see in our criminal justice system for a long time. You know, I think that the good thing, as I was sort of alluding to before, is that as decisions are made short of incarceration, because we can't send anybody to prison, they're not accepting anybody, and so judges are confronted with that. Okay, well, if they're not accepting, what am I going to do? Well, now maybe then judges will be more likely in the future to use that truly for what it's for, which is, you know, an absolute last resort. And I think that maybe we can, we should be studying data as a result of all of these things, and I'm hopeful that we will. And I think that this will strengthen the need for alternatives to incarceration, number one. I think it's going to strengthen the need for a more efficient system, number two. Number three, my God, if this doesn't help us with bail reform, I mean, my goodness, please, in 2021, I hope that we can pass something as a state, because it ain't working the way we're doing it right now. But hopefully we can do that. And I think this might be an impetus for change as well.
Got it. Well, again, Brandon, I want to thank you for your time and your transparency today. Also, thank you, Dr. Green and Mrs. Jessica, for your time as well. I'm going to go ahead and send it back over. Well, actually send it to Benjamin or Ben so he could go ahead and finalize everything off.
Thank you. Yeah, and thank you to everyone as well who's participated. This has been really helpful. So just as a quick recap for folks, here's what we covered in this town hall. First, one of the things we talked about, right, is that due to confinement in the jail, due to the confinement in close quarters and unsanitary conditions, jails pose a unique risk to public health, and an outbreak in the jail threatens to overwhelm our already strained local healthcare system. So the safest way for us to deal with this is decarceration, right? The safest way for people inside and the safest way for people outside the jail. Second, what all people inside prisons and jails right now are at risk of contracting COVID-19. And that's not just those that the criminal legal system says are not threats to public safety. Everybody in the jail is at risk of contracting COVID-19. And we affirm that no one is disposable. So we're asking our public officials, one of the things we want them to do is follow the criteria and the recommendations of medical personnel on how they should be prioritizing releases. And third and final, I think we need to take lessons, like everybody has been saying, from this crisis to the future. Prisons, jails, and courts are struggling in this moment to really respond effectively to promote the life and safety of incarcerated people. We've heard some wonderful things that Judge Birmingham is doing in his court. And overall, one of the other things we've heard, right, is that this is still up, though, to individual judges, to the individual actors in the system to get things done. And one of the reasons that's difficult to do is because jails and prisons are death-making institutions, and they're not designed to promote life and safety. They're designed to inflict suffering and pain. And so this crisis really points to a deeper truth that these institutions are not designed to solve the problems that we've been told they're designed to solve. So what we've asked the county to do, I'm going to drop a platform for you in the chat. We've made some demands to to officials in the county about what we believe our public officials can be doing. And we have made some calls, some emails, and we have contacted our public officials. And as the judge was just talking about, we are seeing some movement in response to the demands that all of you are making. But we need to continue to see movement, and we need to see more people released from the jail. So I'm going to send this now to Tiara to tell you what you can do in this moment to protect people who are currently in the jail.
Thank you, Ben. You all, we've taken in a lot of information on tonight, and I thank everyone who's on this call, everyone for their analysis, and just for being a part of what we're doing tonight. Your transparency is needed in this moment. I'm pretty sure you guys that are watching are like, what can we do right now? What can I do? We are a part of a jury right now, you guys. We are active participants in the verdict of who comes home. We are ultimate decision makers in this moment ourselves. There's something we can do. So we're asking that you sign on to send out emails onto key decision makers. And those key decision makers are Presiding Judge Timmy Kemp, Presiding Judge Carmen White, and our Sheriff Marion Brown. In those letters are concerns. You can read onto them. They will be in the chat for you guys on Facebook. We'll also be linking them as well. In that direct action, you will be uplifting the concerns that we're having on the outside looking in. We're asking for transparency. We're asking that our folks come home. We ask that we know what the conditions are looking like in real time, you guys. So I hope that you leave today knowing not only what's happening, but also knowing what you can do right now to help not only flatten the curve, but save lives. We can save lives in this moment and in this hour. We serve a big God, you guys. We serve a big God, and I hope that your convictions, and I hope that whatever you're feeling right now, you know that our loved ones that are incarcerated are feeling that in ways that we can't even explain. Right now, we're asking that you be a voice for the voiceless. We're asking that you do your part, that you be a voice to those who cannot in this hour. So as Ben said, check out the chat, get that information and fill it out, please, and share it with your family members, share it to your friends. We want to save as many people as we can right now.
Can I just say one thing?
Yeah.
I really appreciate you all engaged and demanding transparency from the people that you all have put into office. It's an honor for me to speak to you all tonight. If I can ever do anything for you, please let me know. You can come to my court. It's on the 6th floor. Usually I'll be there. I guess I'll certainly be there when all this is over, but I would love to continue the dialogue whenever you all want.
Thank you, Judge, so much for your transparency and for your time. And thank you all that joined us on tonight. Have a great night. And if our hearts and minds are clear, I just say thank you, and I'll talk to you guys later.